The Caldwell family's house stood on the outskirts, where the village of Stone Creek reluctantly yielded its rights to the ancient Gloomwood. It was the last island of the human world before the boundless, silent ocean of the northern woods. For most of the villagers, it was an unsettling place on the edge, where wolves howled at night and shadows from 100-year-old pines roamed the yard. But for Michael, Olivia, and their 12-year-old son, Alex, this house was not the edge, but the center of their universe. They had moved here 5 years ago from the bustling city, not by choice. Michael, once a successful geologist, had fallen from a cliff during an expedition. He survived, but his right leg, shattered in several places, never fully recovered. The limp put an end to his career. The world of survey teams, wilderness campfires, and the thrill of discovery was closed to him. The city, with its hustle and staircases, became a form of torture. And so they made a decision to sell their apartment and buy this old, abandoned house that had once belonged to Olivia's distant relatives. The house was old, built from pine that had darkened with time, but it was sturdy. They poured their souls into it. Michael, despite his bad leg, re-roofed it and installed new windows. Olivia, a teacher by calling, transformed the weed-choked yard into a flourishing garden. She said that every flower had its own character, and her garden was like a noisy, friendly classroom. Here grew proud, stern roses, modest, shy violets, and cheerful, reckless marigolds. Michael was a man of few words, reserved. The injury had left a mark of somber sadness on his character. He rarely smiled, but when he did, with the corners of his eyes looking at his wife or son, his face would transform, becoming boyishly open. He found a new calling. He became a skilled carpenter. From his hands came amazing things: carved window frames, sturdy, well-made furniture, and amusing wooden toys. His workshop in the old shed was his sanctuary, a place where he could forget what he had lost and focus on what he could create. Olivia was the heart of this home. Energetic, with a warm, radiant smile, she managed to juggle her job at the local rural school, where she taught several subjects at once, with the demands of the household. She was the force that kept Michael from withdrawing into his misfortune, the one who turned their forced exile into a conscious choice. "We didn't run away, Michael," she would say. "We just found our place." And she genuinely believed it. And Alex was the soul of this place, a quiet, thoughtful boy with large, serious, hazel-colored eyes. The move from the city, which would have been a tragedy for many children, turned out to be a gift of fate for him. He didn't care for loud crowds, computer games, or commotion. His world was the forest. The Gloomwood began right behind their property, and for Alex it was not scary or foreign. It was a huge book full of secrets and wonders that he was learning to read. He knew where the sweetest berries grew, where the king belates hid, and where, on an old forest road, one could find the tracks of a moose or a wild boar. His greatest treasure was a thick, worn-out notebook with a vinyl cover, which he called his observation journal. In it, he recorded everything he saw. May 15th, the swallows are back. They landed on our shed. That means no more frosts. June 3rd, found a squirrel's nest in an old pine, a dray. Mom says squirrels are very caring. I won't disturb them. July 20th, saw lynx tracks by the creek. Dad said a lynx is a very cautious animal and rarely shows itself to people. I was lucky. This journal was his secret. He didn't show it even to his parents, feeling that it was his personal, intimate dialogue with nature. The forest entrusted its secrets to him, and he entrusted them to paper. Most often he would go to his secret base, his name for an old, dilapidated prospector's dugout left over from a bygone era. It was located a couple of miles from the house in a remote, overgrown ravine. There, Sitting on an old crate, he could watch the life of the forest for hours. He saw the busy scurrying of ants, a lizard basking on a rock, a woodpecker drumming on a dead tree. Recently, he had a new subject for observation, a wolf. He saw it for the first time a month ago. It was a large, mature animal that sometimes passed by the ravine on its own secret trail. At first, Alex was scared, frozen in place, afraid to move. But the wolf seemed to pay him no attention. It walked with a confident, masterful gait, and its appearance held a calm, primal power. Alex noticed that one of its canines protruded slightly, giving its muzzle a somewhat asymmetrical, stern expression. For this, he mentally nicknamed it Fang. He never tried to get close to the wolf. He just watched from a distance, holding his breath, and made entries in his journal. August 5th saw Fang again. He's very strong. His fur is gray with dark markings. He's the master of this forest. I wonder if he has a family. This secret was his most important one. He felt an almost mystical connection with this animal. To him, the wolf was the embodiment of the spirit of this forest, wild, free, living by its own honest laws. It was in this quiet, harmonious world, where every rustle had its meaning and every day was filled with small discoveries, that a storm was destined to break, a storm born not of nature but of human greed. But the Caldwell family didn't know this yet. They were just living their lives on the edge of the forest, in their own little paradise, believing they had found their place, a place they would soon have to defend. The first cloud on their clear sky appeared on an ordinary September day, no different from hundreds of others. Olivia returned from school, tired but pleased. Her students had written an essay on my hometown, and their work had been surprisingly touching. Michael was in the yard, finishing a carved window frame, and the smell of fresh pine shavings mingled with the aroma of blooming dahlias. Alex, as usual, had just returned from the forest, his eyes shining with excitement from a new entry in his journal. He had seen Fang hunt a mouse. The world was harmonious and solid, and it was at that moment that it cracked. Patty, the mail carrier, usually left newspapers and rare letters in the box by the gate. But today, breathing heavily, she walked all the way to the porch. In her hand was not an ordinary envelope, but a thick official one with a seal and a delivery confirmation. "This is for you, Caldwell's certified," she said, handing it to Olivia. "From the court, sign here, please." The word court echoed in the silence of their yard like a gunshot. Olivia looked at her husband in bewilderment. Michael put down his plane and came over, his face serious. What business could they have with the court? They lived quietly, broke no laws, had no debts. Olivia signed the receipt with a trembling hand. Patty, burning with curiosity but not daring to ask questions, quickly retreated. They were left alone on the porch with this white, frightening envelope in their hands. "Open it," Michael said in a hollow voice. Olivia tore open the envelope. Inside was an official form with typewritten text. She began to read, at first aloud, but her voice grew quieter and broke off mid-sentence. She silently handed the paper to her husband. It was a copy of a lawsuit. It stated that a certain Mr. Alistair Croft, a district court judge, had filed a claim to recognize his ownership of the land on which their house stood. The statement mentioned newly discovered circumstances and pre-statehood documents found in the archive, according to which this plot of land had belonged to his ancestors for centuries. Their own title, obtained 5 years ago, was being challenged as having been issued in error, based on incorrect survey data. For a few minutes they stood in complete silence, rereading the dry, soulless lines that negated their entire life. "This has to be a mistake." Olivia was the first to break the silence. "It's absurd. A judge, Croft, I've heard of him. A respected man in the county. It's probably just a misunderstanding." "There are no misunderstandings like this, Liv," Michael replied slowly. His face had turned to stone. As a geologist used to working with documents and maps, he immediately knew this was no mistake. It was an attack, a calculated, precise, and ruthless one. "This is our land. We bought it honestly. All the documents are in order. I checked everything myself. But why would he want our house? They say he has a mansion in the city." "Because it's in the right place," Michael chuckled bitterly. "The forest, the river nearby, a perfect spot for a vacation home or a hunting lodge for respectable people." Alex, who had been standing silently nearby, sensing the trouble thickening in the air, asked quietly, "Dad, are they going to kick us out?" "No one is going to kick you out," Olivia answered too sharply, hugging her son. "We'll figure it out. We'll go to the county seat tomorrow and clear this up. It's just a mistake." But from her frightened eyes, it was clear she didn't believe it herself. The next day, Michael drove to the county seat. He was determined. He was sure that as soon as he showed them his documents, the title deed, the sales agreement, the ridiculous accusation would crumble to dust. But he hit a wall built of indifference, bureaucracy, and poorly concealed contempt. At the land registry office, his first stop, a young woman with painted nails, lazily clicking at her keyboard, announced that an inaccuracy had indeed been found in their file. "According to archival data that was pulled," she droned monotonously, not looking at him, "the boundaries of your plot overlap with a plot for which rights were restored by a court decision." "What court? What decision?" Michael boiled over. "No one notified us." "They didn't have to. The case didn't concern you. It was about restoring historical rights. You need to go to court." She yawned and buried her face in her phone. It was even worse at the courthouse itself. Judge Croft's secretary, a woman of indeterminate age with an arrogant face, declared that the judge was busy and could not see him. "File your objections in accordance with the law, through the clerk's office," she ground out. At the clerk's office, they looked at him as if he were insane. A lawsuit from Alistair Croft himself? An elderly woman raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Well, buddy, I don't envy you. No one's ever won against him. He knows the law like the back of his hand." Michael went from office to office, showing his documents, trying to explain. But it was all in vain. As soon as officials heard Croft's name, their faces changed. They became deaf and blind. They sent him from one desk to another, made him write pointless applications, and lost his papers. He spent the entire day in this Kafkaesque labyrinth. He knocked on doors, and they remained closed. He appealed to the law, and the law was silent. By evening, exhausted and empty, he understood. This was not a mistake, it was not a misunderstanding, it was a system that worked for one man, for Judge Croft. And he, Michael Caldwell, a simple man with a bad leg, had gotten in its way. He was not a plaintiff or a defendant, he was just an obstacle to be removed. He returned home after dark. Olivia and Alex were waiting for him on the porch. From his appearance alone, from his slumped shoulders and extinguished eyes, they understood everything. "Well?" Olivia asked quietly. "It's war," Michael answered just as quietly, sitting down on the step. "They've declared war on us, and it looks like we've already lost." He dropped his head into his hands. For the first time in years, he felt utterly powerless. Not against the elements, not against the mountains, but against the sticky, suffocating web of human depravity. Alex, seeing his father's despair, went over and hugged him. "We haven't lost, Dad. We're not alone." Michael raised his tired eyes to him, not understanding. "We have Fang," the boy said seriously. Michael gave a bitter smile. What could a wolf do against a judge? But he said nothing, not wanting to hurt his son. He didn't know that at that very moment at the edge of the forest, a large gray wolf was sitting, watching their lit window. He didn't understand human words, but he sensed the trouble that had come to the home of his little friend, and he was ready for his own kind of war. While the world of adults was cracking at the seams under the pressure of papers with official seals, Alex had his own secret life, full of rustles, scents, and silent discoveries. The forest had not betrayed him. It remained just as honest, wise, and fair. And it was there, into its green, silent embrace, that the boy escaped from his parents' anxious conversations and the oppressive atmosphere that had settled in their home. His observation journal became not just a hobby, but a salvation. He immersed himself in the study of forest life with renewed energy, as if trying to find in its simple and understandable order an answer to the complex and unjust human entanglement. Fang the lone wolf became the main character of his entries. Alex no longer saw him as a random visitor. He purposefully sought meetings, spending hours in his shelter in the ravine, hoping to see the familiar gray silhouette. He studied its habits, its roots. He knew that at dawn the wolf often passed by the old stream, and at noon it liked to lie on a sun-warmed rock at the top of a hill. He noticed something else, too. The wolf wasn't just stern, it was wounded. Alex saw how it would sometimes, when alone, meticulously lick its front left paw, and when it walked, it tried not to put weight on it, which made its gait seem slightly uneven. The boy realized the animal was suffering from an old, nagging pain. One day, growing bolder, Alex decided to follow him. He kept a great distance, hiding behind trees, trying not to snap a single twig. The wolf, of course, sensed him. It stopped several times, turned its head, and its amber eyes seemed to look directly at the boy. But it didn't growl or show aggression. It was as if it were allowing this strange, quiet human child to follow it, seeing not a threat, but only curiosity. The trail led Alex to the densest, most remote part of the forest, littered with fallen trees, a place where it seemed no one ever went. Here, under the gnarled roots of a huge fir tree that had fallen years ago, was its den. Dry, secluded, securely hidden from prying eyes. Alex hid in the bushes nearby. He saw the wolf crawl into its den, and after a while, a low, plaintive whimper came from within. It was not a threat. It was a moan of pain. The wolf was suffering. The boy's heart ached with pity. As a child, he couldn't grasp the full complexity of the situation with the house, but he understood the language of pain perfectly. He saw a creature in distress, and with all his childish heart, he wanted to help. The idea came to him on its own. A few years ago, their old dog, a German shepherd named Rex, had injured his paw on some wire, and his mom had treated it with a special ointment, thick, fragrant, made from herbs. The ointment was almost magical. The wound healed in a few days. The tube with the leftover medicine was still in the home first aid kit. The next day, waiting for his parents to leave for the city for another consultation with a lawyer, Alex carried out his first secret operation. He took a large piece of meat from the refrigerator that his mom had set aside for dinner. He found the precious tube of ointment in the first aid kit, and hiding it all in his old backpack, he set off for the forest. He approached the den. The wolf wasn't there. It had likely gone hunting or was simply roaming its territory. Alex's heart was pounding with fear and excitement. He knew he was doing something forbidden, dangerous, but the desire to help was stronger. He placed the piece of meat right at the entrance to the den, and next to it, on a large, clean burdock leaf, he squeezed out a generous portion of the fragrant ointment. He didn't know if the wolf would understand that it was medicine, but he hoped its animal instinct would guide it. He didn't wait. Leaving his gift, he quickly left so as not to startle the den's owner. All evening he was on pins and needles. When he got home, he said nothing to his parents. That night he dreamt of Fang gratefully licking the ointment off the leaf. 2 days later he went to the den again. His heart stood still. The meat was gone, and so was the burdock leaf with the ointment. But most importantly, next to the entrance, on the packed earth, lay a gift, a small gray bird with a broken wing. It wasn't prey that the wolf hadn't finished. It was an offering, a sign. The wolf had understood his gesture and had responded in kind. It had accepted his help, and it had thanked him. From that day on, a silent, incredible friendship was forged between the boy and the wolf. Almost every day, Alex would bring it a treat, a piece of bread, a bone from the soup. He didn't try to get close, didn't try to pet it. He just left the food and went away. And the wolf, in turn, began to trust him. It stopped hiding. When Alex came, it would come out of its den and lie down nearby, watching him with its intelligent, attentive eyes. It allowed the boy to be in its territory. For a wild animal, this was the highest degree of trust. Alex would sit on a fallen log and talk to it. He told it everything about his fears, his parents' problems, the unjust judge. The wolf would listen, tilting its head slightly, and it seemed to the boy that it understood everything. In the presence of this mighty silent beast, all human problems seemed small and insignificant. Fang's paw slowly healed. He limped less, moved more confidently. The ointment had apparently helped. One day, Alex came to the den as usual. Fang came out to meet him, but he didn't lie down as he usually did. He stood for a moment, looked at the boy, and then, turning, slowly walked deeper into the forest, looking back as if inviting him to follow. Without a second thought, Alex followed. He wasn't afraid. He knew that with this animal, he was completely safe. Fang led him to a small forest lake, hidden in the thicket, that no one in the village knew about. The water was crystal clear, and rare medicinal herbs that his mother had searched for in vain throughout the forest grew along its banks. It was the wolf's secret, sacred place, and he shared it with his little friend. They sat on the shore of this lake, and there was no more fear between them. There was only a quiet, trusting unity, a human child and a wild predator, two lonely beings who had found in each other what their own worlds could not give them. Alex did not yet know that this friendship, born of compassion, would soon become his family's only hope in their unequal struggle against human depravity. After Michael's failed trip to the county seat, a silence settled over the Caldwell house, but it was not the peaceful silence they were used to. It was a heavy, oppressive silence of anticipation. They were in the position of a besieged fortress, not knowing where or when the next blow would come. The blow came a week later. One day, a modest but expensive sedan pulled up to their gate. Two men got out. Both were in stern suits, with equally impenetrable faces and cold eyes. They didn't look like locals or tourists. They radiated a city-bred business acumen and a hidden threat. "Michael Caldwell," one of them asked, the older one, without introducing himself. His voice was flat, emotionless, like a robot's. "That's me," Michael answered, stepping out onto the porch. Olivia and Alex stood behind him. "We represent Alistair Croft," the stranger continued. "We have a business proposal for you. You know that the situation with your property is, let's say, ambiguous. Lawsuits are long, stressful, and expensive. Mr. Croft is not an unkind man. He is willing to consider your situation and resolve the matter peacefully." "Peacefully? What peace?" Michael couldn't contain himself. "This is our land. We have all the documents." "Documents are a debatable thing," the younger one smirked. "But a court decision is final, and I think you can guess what it will be. So here's the offer. Mr. Croft is prepared to compensate you for the, shall we say, inconvenience. He is offering for your house and land a sum." He named a figure that was 5 times lower than the market value of even their old house, let alone the land. It wasn't an offer, it was an insult. "Are you kidding me?" Michael's face turned purple. "We are not kidding. "We are offering you the only reasonable way out," the older one retorted coldly. "Otherwise, you won't even get this. You will simply lose everything by court order. Think about it. We're giving you 3 days." They didn't wait for an answer. They turned, got in the car, and drove away, leaving behind the smell of expensive cigarettes and a feeling of sticky, disgusting filth. The answer was obvious. Neither Michael nor Olivia even considered this option. To accept it meant not just losing their home, it meant betraying themselves, admitting defeat in the face of audacity and lawlessness. "We won't give up," Olivia said firmly that evening. "We'll fight to the end." But their fight was like trying to stop a steamroller with their bare hands. And Croft, having been refused, moved from business proposals to other methods. A quiet, grueling war began. The first casualty was the fence. One morning they discovered that several sections of their neat picket fence, which Michael had crafted with such love all summer, had been ripped out by the roots. Not broken, but torn out with a demonstrative vicious force. Then one night someone dumped a pile of garbage at their gate. Broken bottles, old rags, food waste. It was petty, humiliating, and it made them feel even sicker. But the worst was something else. Rumors began to spread through the village. At first quietly, in whispers, and then louder and more confidently, that the Caldwells were swindlers, that they had illegally seized land, cheated someone, that Michael was not a disabled geologist, but some ex-convict hiding out in the wilderness, and Olivia was not a teacher, but his accomplice. These rumors, like poisonous ivy, entwined their home. People who had previously been neutral or even sympathetic towards them began to shun them. The shopkeeper, who had chatted amiably with Olivia just recently, now served her in silence with pursed lips. The men with whom Michael sometimes exchanged a few words at the well now fell silent and turned away at his approach. They were in a vacuum, in a social isolation that was worse than a broken fence. Olivia would come home from school dejected. The children, having overheard adult conversations, began to avoid Alex. They called him the son of thieves. Alex took this the hardest. He withdrew, stopped going outside. His only refuge was the forest and his silent friend, Fang. Only there, in the forest, did he feel safe. Only Fang didn't judge him, didn't whisper behind his back. The wolf accepted him as he was. His friendship became the boy's only support in this crumbling world. The Caldwell family held on. They supported each other as best they could. In the evenings they would gather around the large round table, light a kerosene lamp, and talk. They talked about trivial things, reminisced about funny incidents from their past life, and made absurd plans for the future. They created their own small, fragile world inside the besieged fortress, trying to prove to themselves and to the unseen enemy that they could not be broken. But with each passing day, it became more difficult. The pressure mounted. One night someone threw a rock through their window. The glass shattered with a crash, showering the floor with shards. Alex screamed in fear from his room. Olivia, pale, held him close, while Michael stood with a rifle in his hands at the broken window, peering into the darkness, but saw only the shadows of trees and felt his complete helplessness. They realized these were no longer just pranks. These were direct threats. They were being driven out, systematically, ruthlessly, step by step, tightening the noose around their necks. Michael went to the county seat again, this time to the local sheriff. The young lieutenant listened to him with feigned sympathy. "I understand, Mr. Caldwell, it's unpleasant, but you have no proof." So the fence was broken. Maybe it was the farm's cows a herd was passing through, the garbage, teenagers fooling around, the rock, plenty of hooligans around. You didn't catch anyone red-handed, and you shouldn't suspect a respected man like Alistair Croft. He does a lot for the county. This was the end. The circle was complete. The system that this lieutenant was supposed to represent was not working for them. It was working for Croft. That evening, for the first time in years, Michael took a bottle of vodka he had saved for the darkest day from its hiding place. He poured himself a full glass and drank it in one gulp. "They're going to destroy us, Liv," he said to his wife, looking at her with empty, burned-out eyes. "They'll just wipe us out, trample us and not even notice." Olivia came over and hugged him. "They won't destroy us, Michael. As long as we're together, we can't be destroyed." But there was no longer the same confidence in her voice. She was scared, too. They both understood that their quiet, stubborn defense had been breached. The enemy was at the very walls of their fortress, and the next assault could be the last. They didn't know that help would come from where no one expected it, from the very depths of the gloomwood, where a large gray wolf had long sensed their plight. Hope is a strange thing. Even when there's almost none left, it continues to smolder in the farthest corner of the soul, like a stubborn ember in a cooling fire. And it was this ember that the Caldwells clung to. After the night attack, Michael realized that passive defense was no longer enough. They had to go on the offensive, and the only legal weapon they had left was the law. Gathering all their modest savings, he drove to the county seat again. This time his destination was a legal aid office. He found a public defender's office, a small, shabby room on the ground floor of an old building that smelled of dust and cheap cigarettes. The lawyer, a man in his 50s with a tired face and nicotine-stained fingers, studied the documents Michael brought for a long, attentive time. He frowned, shook his head, and scribbled something in his notebook. For a moment, a glimmer of hope flickered in Michael's heart. This man seemed thoughtful, experienced. Perhaps he would find some loophole, some chink in the law. "Yes, your case is, to put it mildly, unenviable," the lawyer finally said, leaning back in his creaky chair. "Croft is a serious figure, very serious. He's the king around here." "But the law is on our side," Michael protested heatedly. "Here's the title deed, here's the contract, everything is clean. And his pre-statehood documents, that's an obvious forgery." The lawyer gave a bitter smile. "The law, Mr. Caldwell, is a flexible thing, especially when the judge himself is the one bending it. Your documents certainly have weight, but he'll push the survey error angle. He'll appoint his own expert who, you can be sure, will confirm his version. You'll appeal, it'll be rejected. You'll be in court for years, spend all your money, all your nerves, and in the end, you'll still lose. I've seen dozens of cases like this. So we should just give up?" Despair crept into Michael's voice. The lawyer paused, lit a cigarette, and blew a stream of blue smoke towards the ceiling. "Take my advice," he said, lowering his voice almost to a whisper. "As a human being, I can see you're a decent man. Don't get involved. Croft is not the man to go to war with. He'll grind you to dust and not even notice. While he's offering money, take it. Yes, it's pennies. Yes, it's unfair, but it's better than ending up with nothing at all. Believe me, it's the best way out of your situation." He said this with a strange expression on his face, a mixture of cynicism and sympathy. Michael understood everything. This lawyer wasn't going to fight for them. He was afraid. Like everyone else in this town, he was just doing his job, giving socially acceptable advice to get rid of a dangerous and hopeless case as quickly as possible. Michael stood up silently. "Thank you for the advice," he said, and his voice had a cold, metallic ring. He didn't pay for the consultation, which felt like a spit in his face. He just walked out, leaving the lawyer sitting in a cloud of his tobacco smoke and his cowardice. This visit was the final nail in the coffin of their hopes. Olivia, however, was not ready to give up. Her teacher's habit of believing in justice and order wouldn't let her. She sat down at the table and began to write. She wrote at night, by the light of a kerosene lamp, when Alex was already asleep. She wrote to every authority she could think of: the state prosecutor's office, the office of the Human Rights Commissioner, the governor, even the president's administration. She detailed the facts without emotion. Here are the property documents. Here is the judge's lawsuit. Here are the facts of pressure and threats. She sent these letters by certified mail with return receipts and ran to the post office every day, waiting for a reply. Replies came, dry, soulless form letters. Your appeal has been received and forwarded for consideration to, and then followed the name of the very same district prosecutor's office or the very same district court where Croft controlled everything. The circle was complete. Their complaints about the system were returned to the hands of those they were complaining about. Some letters were lost altogether, never reaching their destination. The family realized they were completely alone. They were a tiny, lonely island washed on all sides by the murky, all-consuming ocean of lawlessness. Their cries for help drowned before they reached the shore. The atmosphere in the house became unbearable. Michael almost stopped talking, sinking into a dark, gloomy silence. He would spend all day in his workshop, but the work didn't progress. He would just sit there, staring blankly at an unfinished chair or a carved board. Olivia, exhausted by her nightly vigils over letters and her daytime work at school, grew thin and dark shadows appeared under her eyes. Alex felt all of this. He saw his father's despair, his mother's silent tears. He stopped asking questions, afraid of causing them more pain. His childhood, it seemed, had ended in a single day. He had grown up, and this adulthood was bitter. His only comfort remained the forest. There, away from the house full of anguish, he could breathe, and he was not alone. He had Fang. Their friendship grew even stronger. Now Alex went into the forest not just as an observer. He went to a friend. He brought him not only food, but also his pain. He would sit by the den and tell the wolf everything, about the corrupt lawyer, about the letters that went nowhere, about his father's extinguished eyes. Fang listened. He lay nearby, his large head on his paws, and looked at the boy with his intelligent amber eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the intonation. He felt the pain and despair radiating from this small human creature. And when Alex fell silent, the wolf would come over and gently nudge his hand with its cold nose. It was his way of saying, "I'm here, I'm with you, you're not alone." And Alex would feel better. Here in the forest, next to this mighty silent beast, he felt protected. Different laws applied here, simple and honest ones. And he believed, almost desperately, that this forest justice could somehow miraculously defeat human lies. He didn't yet know how right he was. The hopelessness that had settled in the Caldwell house was like a thick, suffocating fog. It seeped into every crack, making food tasteless and the air heavy. Michael barely left his workshop, but the sound of his axe and the rasp of his plane were no longer heard. He just sat in silence, surrounded by the smell of wood shavings and his own dark thoughts. Olivia, while grading her students' notebooks, would often freeze, staring into space, a tear slowly rolling down her cheek, which she would quickly wipe away. Alex saw all of this, and his childish heart ached with helplessness. He felt guilty, though he didn't know for what. Guilty for being happy when his parents were miserable. And he was only happy in one place, the forest. The forest became his true home. As soon as he finished his homework, he would grab his old backpack and run off, not to friends whom he no longer had, but to his only silent friend. Fang always waited for him. Their meetings became a vital necessity for Alex, a breath of fresh air. The wolf seemed to sense his state. It didn't stray far from its den, as if knowing the boy would come. Sometimes they would just sit side by side, each lost in their own thoughts. Other times Fang, as if trying to distract him from his sad thoughts, would jump up and lead him to the most hidden corners of his forest, to a beaver lodge on the stream, to a clearing dotted with wild strawberries, to an old owl's nest, On one such day, overcast and windy, they wandered particularly far. Fang led him along a barely visible path, winding through a maze of fallen trees. Alex had never been in this part of the Gloomwood. The forest here was older, darker. Suddenly Fang stopped. He didn't growl, but his entire posture expressed extreme tension. The fur on his hackles stood up, and his ears were pressed against his head. He was looking somewhere ahead, through the dense hazel thickets. Alex froze. He understood that there was something alien, dangerous up ahead. Cautiously, trying not to make a sound, he peered out from behind the bushes. In a small hollow, hidden from view, stood an old, leaning hunter's cabin, long abandoned, with a collapsed roof and boarded-up windows. But parked right next to this cabin was a familiar black SUV, Judge Croft's vehicle. The boy's heart sank. What was he doing here in such a remote place? The car door opened, and the judge himself got out. He was dressed not in a stern suit, but in an expensive hunting outfit. Glancing around like a thief, he took a heavy briefcase from the trunk. Another man emerged from behind the cabin to meet him. He was a short, stocky fellow with a cunning, unpleasant face, the kind of person the villagers called a shady character. Alex had seen him a few times in the county seat, and rumors had it that he was involved in some illegal land and timber deals. "You bring it?" the short man asked, nodding at the briefcase. "Everything as we agreed, Silas," Croft replied, and his voice, usually commanding and steady, was now quiet and conspiratorial. "The final payment and the documents." "Are the documents real?" Silas smirked. "I hear this Caldwell fellow is stubborn. They're as real as something that never existed can be." The judge chuckled. "Papers from the old archives of the burned-down ranger station. No one will ever find the loose ends. A couple of hearings and the land is ours. And that washed-up geologist will pack his bags. The main thing is to keep it quiet." Alex, holding his breath, listened, afraid to move. He didn't understand all the words, but he grasped the gist. They were talking about his home, about his land, and about fake documents. Fang, standing next to him, let out a low growl. Alex fearfully pulled him closer, whispering, "Quiet, quiet, buddy, hush." "And what about the hunt?" Silas asked, counting the money. "The clients are waiting. You promised a moose." "They'll get their moose," Croft replied smugly. "Next week. I've already scouted a spot at the Salt Licks. They're thick there now. The main thing is that no one finds that stash with my trophy, Walther. That would raise unnecessary questions. It's an old story, but you never know." "Who's gonna find your stash?" Silas waved a dismissive hand. "The ranger station burned down 20 years ago, and that ranger with it. All traces are gone." They stood for a bit longer, whispered about something, and then drove off in different directions. Alex sat in the bushes until the sound of the engines faded in the distance. He was shaking. He didn't realize the full importance of what he had heard, but he felt that he had witnessed something terrible and secret. Fake documents, the burned-down ranger station, a poacher's hunt, and some mysterious Walther in a stash. He rushed home. For the first time in a long while, he forgot about caution, running without watching his path, driven by the desire to tell his parents everything as quickly as possible. Bursting into the house, he, out of breath, blurted out everything he had seen and heard. Michael and Olivia listened, exchanging glances. At first, their faces showed disbelief. The boy's story sounded like a scene from a bad detective novel. "Alex, are you sure you heard everything correctly?" Olivia asked cautiously. "Maybe you imagined it." "I didn't imagine it," Alex protested hotly. "I heard everything about the burned-down ranger station and about the pistol, the Walther." At the mention of the ranger station, Michael tensed. "The burned-down ranger station," he mused. "I remember that story. The old-timers in the village used to talk about it. Many years ago, before we moved here, the old ranger's office burned down. The official version was a lightning strike. And the ranger himself, they say, drank himself to an early grave or just disappeared. But there were rumors that something wasn't right, that the ranger knew too much about the poaching activities of the local bigwigs. The picture began to come together, slowly, frighteningly. Croft, not yet a judge, but a young prosecutor's assistant, poaching, a ranger who knew too much, a fire that destroyed all the archives, and, possibly, the ranger himself, and a trophy pistol that had to be hidden. "If Alex is telling the truth," Olivia said quietly, and a steely note entered her voice, "then this isn't just land fraud. It's something much worse." "But it's just words," Michael countered, though the former hopelessness was gone from his eyes. "A child's retelling. It's not evidence in court. They'll laugh at us." "What about the pistol?" Alex persisted. "If we find that stash and the pistol?" Michael looked at his son. Such a desperate, stubborn fire burned in his eyes that his father's heart stirred. Maybe this was their only ghostly chance, to find what Judge Croft was so afraid of, to find his secret. "Where is this cabin?" he asked his son. "Can you show me the way?" Alex nodded. He didn't yet know that this childish, almost reckless determination would be the beginning of the end for the all-powerful judge, and that his main helper in this search would be not a human, but a large gray wolf who had long been waging his own war against the injustices of this world. Alex's story, though received by his parents with a degree of skepticism, planted a tiny seed of hope in their weary souls. All night, Michael and Olivia talked quietly, recalling scraps of village rumors, piecing together facts. The story of the burned-down ranger station and the missing ranger took on new, sinister shades. But as Michael rightly said, these were just guesses. A boy's account of an overheard conversation wouldn't hold up in court. They needed that stash, the very piece of evidence the judge feared so much. In the morning, Michael tried once more to act according to the law. He drove to the county archive to look up the files on the 20-year-old fire, but as expected, he was met with disappointment. The case was closed, and most of the documents had been lost during the archive's relocation. The circle was complete again. He returned home late that evening, even more dejected than before. The hope that had briefly flickered was extinguished. Alex saw his father's state. He saw his mother, secretly wiping away tears, sit down again to write hopeless letters. And he understood that the adults had given up. They were too exhausted from fighting an invisible wall, too trusting in the power of papers and laws that didn't work in this world. They didn't believe in miracles, but Alex did, and he knew his miracle lived in the forest. The next day, he decided to act on his own. He didn't tell his parents where he was going. He just grabbed his backpack as usual and left for the woods. But he wasn't going to his secret base. He was going to Fang's den. The wolf met him as always, emerging from its lair. Alex sat on the ground, right in front of it. "Fang, I need your help," he said seriously, looking the animal straight in the eyes. "We're in trouble. They want to take our home. And only you and I can do something. You understand everything, don't you?" He spoke to it as he would a person, as his closest friend. He told it everything he had overheard, about Croft, the fake documents, the burned-down ranger station, and the stash with the pistol. "I don't know where it is. The forest is huge. But you know it better than anyone. You can smell everything. We have to find that stash. It's our only chance. Please, help me." Fang listened without moving, his large head tilted slightly. He didn't understand the words, but he caught every intonation in the boy's voice. He felt his anxiety, his desperation, and his stubborn resolve. He came closer and gently nudged Alex's cheek with his cold nose. It was his answer, his agreement. From that day, their search began. It was a strange team, a boy armed only with scraps of an overheard conversation, and a wolf, Guided by its incredible instincts and its bond with its little friend, Alex tried to reason logically. Where could the stash be? Near the old ranger station. But where was that? No one in the village remembered the exact location anymore. Somewhere over there, beyond the Deaf Ravine, the old-timers would say. They began to comb the forest. Every day after school, Alex would go out searching, and Fang was always with him. He no longer led the boy to his favorite spots. He followed him like a loyal bodyguard, but at the same time, he was a guide. He would stop Alex when he got too close to a swamp, growl to warn of a snake in the grass, and show him safe fords across streams. They explored every ravine, every hill, but it was all in vain. The forest was vast, and their search was like looking for a needle in a haystack. The days passed, and the decisive court date grew ever closer. Despair began to creep back into Alex. One day, exhausted, he just sat down on a fallen log and cried, quietly, silently, the way adults cry when they have no strength left. "We're not going to make it, Fang," he whispered through his tears. "We won't find it. They'll win." The wolf came over, rested its heavy head on his lap, and whimpered as if to comfort him. Then it suddenly lifted its head, perked its ears, and froze. It had smelled something that had caught its attention. It looked at Alex, then towards a thick, impenetrable thicket, and back at Alex again. It was as if it were calling him to follow. Alex wiped his tears. He understood that Fang had found something. He stood up and followed him. The wolf led him confidently with almost no meandering. It brought him to the deepest, most desolate part of the forest, where under a thick layer of moss and ferns, the traces of an old, overgrown road could be discerned. And there, in a small clearing, they saw it. A blackened, half-ruined stone foundation, heavily overgrown with grass. It was all that was left of the ranger station that had burned down so many years ago. With a pounding heart, Alex began to examine the ruins. But where to look for the stash? The foundation was large. Near the old oak, he remembered Silas's words. But there were several oaks growing around, and then Fang helped him again. He didn't run around on the foundation. He slowly circled it, sniffing the air. Then he stopped at one of the corners by the mightiest and oldest oak. He paused for a second, and then, with a fierce whine, began to dig. He dug with his front paws, throwing clumps of dirt and stones with such ferocity it seemed he was trying to get to the very heart of the earth. Alex rushed to help him. He cleared the dirt with his hands, dug with a stick, and soon his fingers hit something hard, cold, metal. They dug together, boy and wolf, in a single burst of effort. After half an hour, they managed to unearth it. It was a small, rusted metal box like an ammo can. The lock had long since rusted away and crumbled at the first blow from a rock. With a heart full of dread, Alex opened the lid. Inside, on a layer of rotted cloth, lay several folders of papers. The papers were damp, the letters had blurred, but the headings were still legible. Reports on illegal logging, report on poaching activities. And under the folders, wrapped in an oily rag, lay it, a heavy, black, cold pistol, an old German Walther. Alex, carefully with 2 fingers, picked it up. He was holding Judge Croft's secret, his fear, his sentence. They had found it. They had done it. The boy sat on the ground, clutching the rusty box, and beside him sat the large gray wolf, his faithful friend. The sun broke through the canopy of the trees, illuminating them. But Alex felt no joy, only a heavy weight. He looked at the pistol and understood that it was not just evidence. It was someone's death. And he didn't know how this would help his family in court. Bring a pistol and say a wolf found it? They would be laughed out of the room. He sat in confusion, and at that moment Fang came over and nudged his hand again. It was as if he were saying, "You're not alone. We'll get through this." And Alex knew what to do. He didn't know exactly how, but he knew he had to take this discovery home. To his father, now they had something more than just words. They had the truth, a heavy, rusty truth that smelled of gunpowder and earth, and they had to make the world listen to it. The day of the decisive hearing was gray and damp. Low, heavy clouds hung over the town, threatening a cold autumn rain. The weather perfectly matched the mood of the Caldwell family. They were driving to the county courthouse not as if to a battle, but as if to the gallows. Michael silently drove their old car. His face, gaunt over the past few weeks, seemed carved from stone. Olivia sat beside him, nervously twisting a handkerchief, her gaze fixed on a single point. Alex sat in the back, clutching his backpack. Inside the backpack, wrapped in an old towel, was the rusty box with his terrible discovery. They had a long and difficult conversation the night before. Michael, upon seeing the pistol and the half-rotten papers, was silent for a long time. He was stunned by his son's courage and perseverance. But as an adult, he also understood the precariousness of their position. "This doesn't prove anything, Alex," he said, struggling to find the words. "We can't just walk into court and announce we found a pistol in the woods. They'll charge us with illegal possession of a firearm, and the papers, they're almost unreadable. No one will listen to us." "But it's the truth," Alex exclaimed desperately. "The truth, son," his father replied bitterly, "is what can be proven, and our proof was found by a wolf. Do you understand?" But Alex was adamant. He convinced his father to take the box with them. "Just take it, Dad, just in case. What if—" And Michael, unable to refuse the son who had done more for their family than all the lawyers and officials combined, agreed. The county courthouse greeted them with a cold, official silence. The corridors, smelling of bleach and old paper, seemed endless. Their public defender, the one with the tired face, was waiting for them by the courtroom. He avoided Michael's gaze. "I did everything I could," he muttered. "But you understand, there's no chance." The courtroom was small and stuffy, wooden benches, a prosecutor's table, and on a raised platform, the massive judge's chair. The Caldwells sat on the defendant's bench. Soon, the room began to fill. Some men in suits arrived, apparently representatives for Croft. The arrogant-faced secretary came in, and then he entered. Judge Alistair Croft. He didn't walk in. He glided. In his black robe, which made him resemble a huge bird of prey, he seemed the very embodiment of power and law. He sat in his chair, surveying the room with a cold, expressionless gaze. His face was calm, almost beatific. He was the master of this room. He was justice itself. The hearing began. The Caldwell's lawyer said something, his voice uncertain and pathetic. He cited the property documents, the lack of claims for 5 years, but his every word shattered against the judge's icy composure. Croft listened with polite boredom. Occasionally he would ask short, venomous questions that stumped the lawyer. "Esteemed counsel, are you suggesting that a surveying error is impossible? Are you questioning the competence of state agencies? You speak of property rights, but can a right based on an error be considered lawful?" The lawyer would get flustered, start to stammer, and get lost in his papers. It was obvious he was scared. He wasn't defending them. He was going through the motions. Then Croft's representative spoke. A young, slick lawyer in an expensive suit. He spoke smoothly, confidently, spouting articles of law. He presented the court with those newly discovered documents, supposedly found in the state archives. The papers looked solid, with seals and signatures. Any expert who didn't know the backstory would have deemed them authentic. Michael listened to all this, clenching his fists until his knuckles ached. He felt humiliated, trampled. His entire life, his home, his family, all of it was now being turned into a subject for cynical legal acrobatics. Olivia sat beside him, pale as a sheet, holding his hand. Her fingers were as cold as ice. Alex sat between them. He didn't understand most of the legal terms, but he saw the main thing. He saw how confident and calm the deceitful judge was. He saw how frightened and helpless their lawyer was. He saw the last glimmer of hope dying in his parents' eyes, and he felt a wave of childish but no less powerful righteous fury rising in his chest. This was wrong. This was unjust. The hearing was nearing its end. Croft's representative finished his speech. "Your Honor," he addressed the judge, "the facts are clear. My client's ownership of this parcel of land is indisputable. We ask the court to fully grant the claims." Croft nodded in satisfaction. He swept the room with a victorious gaze. "The court has heard the parties," he began in his even, dispassionate voice. "Having examined the materials presented in the case, the court concludes." At that moment, Alex knew it was over. In a moment, the words would be spoken that would throw them out of their home, out of their lives, and he could no longer stay silent. "He's lying!" he shouted, jumping to his feet. His clear, desperate voice tore through the sleepy silence of the room. "He's lying about everything." All heads turned towards him. Michael grabbed his arm, trying to make him sit down. "Alex, quiet!" But it was too late. Judge Croft frowned. "Young man, maintain order in the court," he said coldly, "or I will be forced to." "You have a stash!" Alex persisted, tears of rage and helplessness welling in his eyes. "At the burned-down ranger station, and a pistol, a Walther. You said so yourself." A deafening silence fell over the room. Everyone looked from the boy to the judge. For a moment, Croft's face froze, becoming an impenetrable mask. But deep in his eyes, Alex managed to catch something, a shadow of fear. "What is this nonsense?" the judge finally said, and for the first time, a metallic note of irritation sounded in his voice. "Bailiff, remove the boy from the courtroom." But it was too late. Something had shifted. The atmosphere in the room had changed, and everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. And what was about to happen was something no one in that room could have foreseen, something that was coming from the very heart of the Gloomwood. Alex's words, thrown into the echoing silence of the courtroom, were like a spark dropped into a powder keg. The air crackled with tension. The bailiff, a burly man with a mustache, had started towards the Caldwell's bench to carry out the judge's order, but stopped halfway, unsure how to react. All eyes were fixed on the judge's chair. For a moment, Croft lost his icy composure. His fingers nervously gripped the arms of his chair, and a faint sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. He regained control of himself too quickly, his face once again becoming an impenetrable mask, but everyone had seen that brief moment of weakness. "I repeat," his voice became hard, ringing, "restore order immediately. The hearing is—" He didn't get to finish. At that very moment, the heavy double doors at the back of the courtroom burst open, not smoothly, but as if struck by something heavy. Everyone instinctively turned their heads. In the doorway stood the bailiff, who had been on duty in the corridor. He was pale as death, his eyes wide with terror, his hand fumbling for his holster. He tried to say something, but only a hoarse mumble came out of his mouth. He was slowly backing into the room, and behind him, out of the semi-darkness of the corridor, and into the space flooded with official light, stepped a gray shadow. It was Fang. For a moment, an absolute dead silence reigned in the room, the kind of silence that only occurs in the forest before a storm. People froze, stunned by the unreality of the spectacle. Their brains refused to believe their eyes. In the temple of justice, in the sterile, ordered world of laws and statutes, stood a wild beast. He was enormous, far larger than any German shepherd. His thick gray fur with dark markings seemed almost silver under the fluorescent lights. His powerful paws stepped confidently on the slippery parquet floor. He didn't look aggressive. He looked like he owned the place. Somehow, in some incredible, incomprehensible way, he had tracked Alex. He had traveled dozens of miles from his den to the city. He had walked through noisy streets, past cars and people. He had found this building, and he had entered. He was not guided by scent. He was guided by that invisible, mystical bond that had formed between him and the boy. He had sensed that his little friend was in trouble, that he needed help. Fang stopped at the threshold. Calmly, without fuss, he surveyed the room with his intelligent amber eyes. He didn't growl, didn't bare his fangs. He just looked. He saw the frightened, astonished faces. He saw the people in uniforms. He saw the boy, his friend, who had jumped to his feet and was looking at him with a mixture of hope and terror. He saw his parents frozen in shock, and then his gaze settled. He found the one he was looking for. His eyes met the eyes of Judge Alistair Croft, and at that moment everyone present in the room felt the atmosphere change. This was no longer just a lost animal. This was a duel, a silent, terrifying duel between two predators, one in a judge's robe, armed with power and lies, and the other in a gray coat, armed only with a truth as ancient as the world itself. "Security!" Croft finally found his voice. It cracked into a shriek. "Get it out of here! Remove that animal from the courtroom! Shoot it if you have to!" The bailiff finally drew his pistol, but his hands were shaking so much he could barely hold it. The other guard by the door also drew his weapon but hesitated to approach. But Fang paid them no mind. He took a step forward, then another. He moved not quickly, but slowly, with the same regal dignity with which he roamed his forest domain. He walked straight towards the raised platform where the judge's bench stood. People on the benches cowered in panic. Someone screamed. The Caldwell's lawyer scrambled under the table. Michael jumped up, shielding Olivia and Alex with his body. He was prepared for the worst. "Alex, get back," he whispered. But Alex wasn't listening. He was watching his friend, and in his heart, fear for him battled with an incredible, all-consuming pride. He came. He didn't abandon him. Fang reached the barrier that separated the judge's bench from the rest of the room. He didn't stop. With a light, powerful leap, he cleared it, landing in absolute silence. The secretary shrieked and dove under her desk. The prosecutor jumped back against the wall, using his briefcase as a shield. And Fang, now on the territory of justice, slowly approached the judge's bench. He stood directly in front of Croft, who sat clutching the arms of his massive chair. His face, usually commanding and impenetrable, had become a gray mask of terror. He looked into the wolf's amber eyes, and in them he saw not just a wild beast, he saw a verdict. His verdict, a verdict delivered not by human laws, but by laws more ancient and just. The wolf didn't growl, it just stared for a long, intense moment, and in that silence, in that silent battle of gazes, there was more threat than in any roar. And then he did what he came to do. He slightly opened his powerful jaws. There was no threatening snarl. He simply unclasped them, and onto the polished, document-covered surface of the bench, a heavy object fell with a dull, solid thud. It was dirty, wrapped in a rotted, oily rag. Fang didn't retreat. He placed his evidence and remained standing, looking at the judge, waiting. Everyone in the room who hadn't fled was frozen. In the ensuing silence, the dull thud sounded louder than a gunshot. All eyes were riveted on the strange, dirty bundle lying right in front of the judge, next to the official seal and a volume of the criminal code. Alex, who had been holding his breath the whole time, recognized it. It was the same bundle from the metal box. Croft stared at it and his face contorted. It wasn't just panic, it was the horror of recognition. Slowly, as if not believing his eyes, he reached out a trembling hand and touched the rag. His fingers wouldn't obey. He struggled to unwrap it. Inside lay it. Old, blackened by time and moisture, but unmistakably recognizable. A German pistol, a Walther, his trophy, the weapon used to kill the uncooperative ranger 20 years ago. The weapon that he, then a young and ambitious prosecutor's assistant, had hidden in the forest, hoping it would remain buried forever along with his secret. At that moment, police officers with automatic rifles, summoned by the terrified bailiff, rushed into the room. "Don't shoot!" Michael shouted, instinctively understanding that something irreparable was about to happen. But the police themselves were in no hurry. They froze at the threshold, stunned by the incredible scene. In the middle of a courtroom at the judge's bench stood a huge wolf, and the judge himself, white as a sheet, was staring at the pistol lying before him. "That's his pistol!" Alex shouted again, his voice ringing in the dead silence. "He killed the ranger with it. We found his stash." Those words, spoken by a child, were the final straw. They shattered Croft's armor. He jumped up, knocking over his massive chair. His eyes darted around crazily, searching for an exit. All his polish, all his authority, had vanished without a trace. Before them was not a judge. Before them was a cornered, terrified criminal. "Lies!" he shrieked. "It's all lies! They planted it! The boy is lying!" He lunged for the side door leading to his chambers. But Fang was alert. He didn't attack. He simply took a step to the side, blocking his path, and let out a low, guttural growl. This time it was a direct, unambiguous threat. Croft recoiled from him as if from fire and in a panic rushed towards the main exit. "Get him!" one of the police officers finally shouted, coming to his senses. The judge, stumbling, muttering something, was apprehended in the corridor. And Fang, seeing that his mission was complete, that his little friend's main enemy was defeated, calmed down. He stopped growling. He swept the room one last time with his wise gaze, letting it rest on Alex. In that look was the full depth of their strange friendship, all his gratitude and a farewell. Then he calmly, unhurriedly jumped down from the platform. He walked past the stunned police officers, past Olivia, who was sobbing with joy and shock, past Michael, who was looking at him with boundless respect. He walked up to Alex and for the one and only time nudged his hand with his damp nose, and then just as calmly, with the same regal dignity with which he had entered, he turned and headed for the courtroom exit. No one tried to stop him. The police, the bailiffs, everyone simply stepped aside, clearing a path for him. He was not just a beast. He was a messenger of a higher forest justice that had come to a place where human law had proven powerless. He walked out of the courtroom, down the echoing corridors, and disappeared, melting into the city's hustle as mysteriously as he had appeared. He went back to his own world, leaving behind chaos, broken careers, and one most important thing, the truth, restored. The scandal that erupted in the small district court was like a forest fire. At first, a small spark, it quickly grew into an uncontrollable blaze, consuming everything in its path. The story of a judge accused of murder right in the courtroom, and of the mysterious wolf that brought the key piece of evidence, instantly spread beyond Stone Creek. Initially, of course, there were attempts to cover it up. Local authorities closely tied to Croft tried to portray the incident as the ramblings of a disturbed boy and a bizarre accident with a stray animal. But it was too late. There were too many witnesses, and most importantly, on the bench in the courtroom lay a piece of physical evidence that could no longer be lost. The old Walther. The case gained publicity. Journalists from state newspapers and television channels flocked to the area, and behind them came more serious people. From the state prosecutor's office and the investigative committee, Croft's case, given his special status and the gravity of the accusations, was immediately escalated to a higher level, and the house of cards that Alistair Croft had so long and carefully built began to crumble. Investigators from the state, unbound by Croft's network of cronies, took on the case with professional zeal. Ballistic analysis confirmed that the pistol was indeed the weapon used to kill a man 20 years ago. The bullet, which had been extracted from an unidentified body back then, the case had long been closed and archived as a cold case, was a perfect match. Silas, the shady realtor, sensing that his patron was sinking, sold him out completely during the first interrogation. He told them about the forged documents for the Caldwell's land, about other earlier schemes, and about the poaching trips for important guests. More and more episodes emerged. Seized properties, bribes, threats. It turned out that Judge Croft was not just corrupt, but a genuine criminal kingpin who had the entire county under his thumb. The judge's arrest had the effect of a bombshell. The system that had seemed monolithic and indestructible to the Caldwells began to shake. Officials who had been rude to Michael and had bounced him from office to office just yesterday were now calling him non-stop, offering help and expressing sympathy. The lawyer who had advised him to not get involved sent a letter of apology and offered to handle their case, to the end, free of charge. Strange days followed for the Caldwells. Accustomed to isolation and hostility, they found themselves at the center of public attention. Their home was no longer a besieged fortress. Journalists and investigators came to visit. Michael and Olivia spent hours giving testimony, telling their story. They told everything except for one thing, about who their silent witness truly was. In all their interrogations, they had agreed to stick to the same story, that their son, Alex, had found the pistol and documents in the forest after accidentally stumbling upon an old hiding place. They didn't mention the wolf. That was their shared secret with Alex, a secret they couldn't entrust to this human world. They understood that if they told the truth, a real hunt would begin for Fang, for their savior. They would try to catch him, study him, lock him in a zoo cage as a phenomenon. They could not allow that. Alex also stood firm. Over and over, without faltering, he recounted his slightly altered version of events, about how he loved to walk in the forest, how he found the old foundation and started digging out of curiosity. He missed Fang terribly, going to their meeting spot every day, but the wolf did not appear. The boy understood that he had left having fulfilled his duty, and that brought both sorrow and a sense of lightness to his heart. A few months later, Croft's trial took place, this time in the state capitol. The Caldwells were the main witnesses. They sat in the courtroom and looked at their enemy. Croft had aged, grown gaunt. There was no longer power in his eyes, only fear and hatred. The sentence was harsh. For organizing a criminal group, fraud, abuse of power, and complicity in a 20-year-old murder, he was sentenced to a long prison term. When the judge read the verdict, Michael squeezed Olivia's hand. They had won. Their small family had managed to break a rotten system. After the trial, the lead investigator, an elderly, experienced colonel, approached them. "Thank you for your courage," he said, shaking Michael's hand, "especially your son's." He smiled at Alex, a true hero. He was about to leave, but stopped. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "we never figured out one thing, how your boy, alone in the forest, managed to dig up that box. It was very heavy and buried deep. And the tracks there, they were strange, not just human." He looked at Alex with a sly twinkle in his eye. Alex blushed and looked down. The colonel chuckled. "Well, it doesn't matter. The result is what counts. The forest, you know, has its own witnesses, and they never lie." With that, he left, leaving the Caldwells with mixed feelings. He had understood everything, but he had kept their secret. Soon, an official letter arrived. Croft's lawsuit was declared null and void, and all his machinations were deemed illegal. The Caldwells' ownership of their home and land was confirmed, finally and irrevocably. Moreover, as compensation for moral damages and in recognition of their service, the county administration offered them an official apology. The war was over. They had defended their home. They had won, but they knew to whom they truly owed this victory, to their silent witness from the gloomwood. The truth, once unleashed, was like a mountain river in spring. It swept away everything in its path. The story of the corrupt judge and the simple family who defended their home spread throughout the state. Journalists, sensing a sensation, flocked to Stone Creek like crows. The Caldwell family became local celebrities overnight. Michael, from a sullen recluse, became a hero in people's eyes, a man who was not afraid to go against the system. Olivia, the quiet, rural teacher, became a symbol of resilience and unbending will. But the main hero, of course, was Alex, the boy who was not afraid, who believed, and who, in essence, single-handedly saved his family. His picture was in every local newspaper. He was invited to TV shows. But this fame only burdened Alex. He didn't consider himself a hero. He answered journalists' questions in monosyllables, averted his eyes, and always tried to leave as quickly as possible. For him, the main thing was something else. His heart ached for another, for Fang. The story of the mysterious wolf, of course, leaked to the press. It became overgrown with incredible rumors and speculations. Some wrote that it was a guardian spirit of the forest. Others that it was a tame wolf specially trained by the Caldwells. Curious tourists even started visiting Stone Creek, hoping to see the legendary beast. Alex listened to all this with anguish. He feared for his friend. He understood that in this human world, full of noise and curiosity, there was no place for someone like Fang. He prayed for only one thing, that the wolf would go far, deep into his wilderness, and that no one would ever find him. Every day after school, he went into the forest. He would go to their meeting place by the old foundation, sit down and wait. But Fang did not appear. The forest was silent. And this silence made Alex more and more anxious. He would leave a piece of bread or meat on an old stump, but the next day he would find it untouched. Only the tracks of foxes or birds. He's gone forever, the boy thought with bitterness. He understood that this was how it had to be. Fang had done his duty and returned to his world. But it was hard to accept. Half a year passed. Winter came and then spring. The Caldwells' life gradually settled into a calm, peaceful routine. The house was no longer a fortress. It was just a home again, cozy, warm, filled with light. Michael worked a lot in his workshop, but now he wasn't hiding from the world there. He was creating with pleasure. Olivia went to school happily, where her students looked at her with adoration. Alex had changed too. He had matured, become more confident. The village kids no longer teased him. On the contrary, they sought his friendship, eagerly asking him about the forest and what it was like with the wolf. But Alex would only smile mysteriously. His secret remained with him. He still went to the forest. But now he went not out of longing, but out of love. He kept his observation journal, but he no longer looked for Fang there. He simply enjoyed the silence and beauty of the gloomwood. He had come to terms with it. He had let his friend go. One day, in early May, when the forest was filled with the chatter of birds and the scent of the first sticky leaves, Alex, as usual, came to their spot. He sat on a fallen log, took an apple from his backpack, and just watched nature awaken. And suddenly he felt a gaze upon him. He slowly raised his head. On the other side of the clearing, at the edge of a dense fir thicket, stood him. Fang. The boy's heart stood still. It was him. Just as mighty, as strong, with the same proud posture and the slightly protruding canine. But he was not alone. Next to him, slightly behind, stood a young, slender gray she-wolf. She looked at Alex with cautious curiosity, but without fear, and at their feet, in the young grass, 3 tiny, clumsy wolf cubs were tumbling about. Fang was no longer a loner. He had created his own pack. He had found his family. The wolf slowly, unhurriedly, walked across the clearing towards the boy. His mate and pups stayed where they were, watching. Fang walked up to Alex and stopped to step away. They looked into each other's eyes, just as they had in the courtroom. But now there was no anxiety or despair in their gazes. There was only a quiet, calm joy of recognition. And then Fang did something he had never done before. He came right up and allowed the boy to touch his fur. Slowly, with a fluttering heart, Alex reached out his hand and buried his fingers in the thick, coarse coat. He stroked his friend, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Tears of happiness. This was their farewell, and their highest gratitude to each other. Fang stood like that for another minute, then pulled away. He looked at Alex one last time, turned, and slowly walked back to his new family. At the edge of the forest, he turned one more time, as if to say goodbye, and along with his pack, dissolved into the green thicket. Alex sat alone for a long time, looking at the empty clearing. He no longer felt bitterness, only a light, quiet sadness and a huge, all-consuming sense of the rightness of it all. The wolf had returned to his world, and the boy to his. Their paths had diverged, but the invisible thread that had bound them in that remote ravine would remain forever. The injustice born of human greed had been defeated by the loyalty and gratitude of a wild beast that had proven to be more human than many people. And Alex, matured and enlightened by this incredible friendship, now knew this for certain. Justice has many faces, and sometimes it has amber eyes and a sharp, slightly protruding fang. If you enjoyed the story, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next stories.